On the Cut. Reflections on life, work and trade on some of the main canals of England in earlier years of the century. Last week, boat people. This week, boats. Spread along the network of canals were the dockyards, where the broad boats of the north and the narrow boats of the Midlands and the south were built. They might all look the same to the outsider, but to the boatman there were endless variations.
Some you'd have high and some you'd have low. It just depends who built the boats. Same as the fellas in Morton's, they built them like a high. And the Anglican Company and Merseyweaver, they built some low ones. Well, you'd get two in them, and probably in fellas in Morton's, you could get two or three in them. And then you'd have your cabin up behind, down, well, you could get in a bed at three, and then you could get one on side bed.
You're talking about very cramped quarters,
seems
to me.
Oh, but everything was packed. You got places for your coal, places for your ropes on the side bed, and then you got your cupboard for your table. You dropped your table down. They used to bring your table down and your bed, what we call the side of the bed, you could bring that down. You used to drop on a leaf or on the side where you put your ropes and everything, or your bedding, and then you rolled your bed down again, and then your table, everything was fitted in that. Your cutlery, your plates, and then underneath your table, you got another cupboard. You could put plates and that in there, and then under your stove or range, whatever you got. Some boats had ranges, some boats had stoves. Well, if you had a range, you could put cupboards on that, you put your pots and pans under that.
Some narrowboat variations recalled by a Staffordshire boatman. At Tring in Hertfordshire, there used to be the boatyard of the Bushell brothers. Some of the methods in use there for building wooden boats went back for centuries, as this craftsman recalls, describing how very large pieces of timber were cut.
One man's working over the piece of timber, the other one's in the pit below, having all the sawdust fall on him, and working in that. And they got to work to a line, too, for cutting the stem and stern posts, particularly the stem post. That was there when I went, because the pit used to be right next to the office.
Wood, of course, was the important thing in your trade. That's because right. You were wooden boat builders.
All wooden boat builders, yes.
Where did the Bushell brothers get their wood?
From east of Berkhamsted, all hardwood, and the softwoods from Keys at Berkhamsted. The timber merchants east, they may come across a tree which they knew that was just a tree they'd be looking for. They'd be actually marked while they were still growing.
Timber supply was the stock in trade of the next speaker from Kinver near to Stourbridge.
Back in the 30s and 40s I supplied timber to the waterways. Generally elm and English oak. Not really altogether from Kimber, more out into Hereford and Worcestershire. Oak grows on that in Herefordshire and Worcestershire because it's on clayey ground. Round Staffordshire it's more or less sandy ground, and it's not the quality that one wants, really, because first of all there's a lot of sap on it, and it's more difficult to cut and springs when you're cutting it. Now the Hereford and Shropshire oak is nice and mellow, easy to cut, and it stays put when you're cutting it. It doesn't warp or spring. The quality was the important part about it. There got to be no shakes in it and no bad knots, and therefore it had to come out of the base of the tree. The base of the tree is always generally free from knots.
What length of planking would you be asked to provide for that kind of building?
Well, the bottoms were 7 feet long and any width and 3 inches thick, so that they went crossways. But the others, I've supplied timber for the Kemsey boatyard at Worcester, boat knees, oak boat knees cut to shape, and they always desired the shape of the tree for those, so that the grain went with the shape that you required.
The trade of boat building was often a family matter. Here's a further recollection by one of the builders with the Hertfordshire firm of Bushell Brothers.
I came straight from school to it. You know, it was a job to me. My brother was there, and I went with him, more or less like. He was mostly on the blacksmithing side. And Mr. Bushell, Joe Bushell, he used to survey new boats that were being built for the Grand Union Canal Company, as I first knew it. And when he was going out to survey a boat, the first thing he'd done was put his ads in the car. If they got the stem post up and primed it, he would take the priming off, see whether there was any sap on the timber.
The adze being a sort of a cross between a chisel and a hammer that will cut curves.
Yes.
It seems to me that thinking of working the curves of a boat, which is the thing that amazes the man who knows nothing about it, sometimes you've got to work to the left and sometimes to the right. How can you manage that if you're a right-handed workman?
Well, I was fortunate enough to work with a man that was as good with his left hand. He was naturally left-hand. And the old Mr. Bushell, he encouraged him to use his right. So therefore, over the years, because he was getting on in years when I started there, he was as good with his left as he was his right.
In the present century, canal boat builders made increasing use of iron and steel, learning new skills to deal with them. When a man showed a special skill, such as painting, he'd often find an opportunity to develop it, as at this former yard on the Coventry Canal at Polesworth.
Yes, woodwork and a bit of ironwork with the riveting. It was about 1935 when we finished building. The last one that was built was one for Mersey Wheel. That was a salt firm. And that must have been about 1935.
How did you learn your painting?
It come natural, and as time went along, I worked into it, you see. It was a tradition. I used to say it, where they wanted a picture and where they wanted flowers or anything like that. No, it's just something that was brought up to, and then lorries come along and the trade slacked down, and it gradually died out.
In commercial days, did you take any notice at all of what other yards were doing by way of painting?
Well, we all know, more or less knew, if one went by, we could tell where it had been painted, you see. But not the exact dock.
How long would it have taken you to do the two side panels like that?
Usually when there's two of us at them, it used to take us about a week to paint a cabin.
That's a story.
Is that the kind of thing that boat people themselves would have wanted?
Yes, they all had one somewhat similar.
Your particular castles are very elaborate.
According to the size of the article in painting, you put it on till you filled it up.
So you just invent it?
I think I've been asked some questions before, and things you can't answer, really. You just fill the space up.
The Mysteries of Painting Roses and Castles by a man who made his own very special and very beautiful mark. When diesel engines became available in the 1920s, the conversion of wooden boats to accept them was a new challenge.
We used to put the engine beds in and used to bore the stern post for the stern tube to go through. That's got to be lined up perfectly to your engine beds, perfect right the way through, because that's
Taking all the strain, really, isn't it?
Just got to be perfect. Yeah. And that's grease packed, of course, for the water and for true running. And then you get an intermediate shaft and then your engine bed, you see.
That, of course, is really the heavyweight side of the woodwork.
Yes.
Or I don't know what you call it, woodwork or carpentry. I
Well,
don't know.
the woodwork, yes, well, it doesn't matter. It's woodwork, carpentry, yeah.
But when it comes to the more delicate sort of fitting, the making of the cabin end,
Yes.
who was responsible for that?
We drop on that just the same. Because when I first went there, we used to use deal boards for over the cabin tops. Then they found that boatmen dropping off from the canal sides in locks onto the top with hobnail boots, that was wearing the tops hit. So we then went to masonite, not hardboard, masonite, which was very hard surface. And then we covered them completely with that.
It must have been quite a moment when you were putting a boat in, or was it?
We were so often so often. If you've been repairing a boat, that may have only been on the dock 3 weeks, month perhaps. So therefore it was a regular occurrence.
What did you use for pulling power?
Nothing, hand power. 2 men on each winch. Never no other way, no.
Did the yard not use any kind of crane for its heavy hoisting work?
None whatever. Everything was manhandled.
Your methods must have gone back to the time of Queen Elizabeth, I should think. Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes. But you got to know the easiest and the best way of doing it.
Narrowboat building in Hertfordshire. Oddly enough, the narrowboats, which fit the narrow and wide canals of the Midlands and the South so comfortably, won't fit the broad canals of the North. It's a fact that emerges forcefully in this next recording with the Midlands boatman at Hatton, near to Warwick, on the Grand Union Canal. How do? How are you doing there?
Let's get that under there anyway.
My goodness, I've never made a recording under a boat before.
What are you doing? This is a state like this.
We're down in a dry dock. It's
Oh.
at the dry dock at Hatton.
That's right.
And when we met last time, you said to me quite calmly, we're going to cut the back end off your boat.
Yes, well, we've cut it off and put another back in you.
And the boat that we're under is an old steel boat,
Oh, it's an old steel boat.
and a
yeah.
rather special one.
There's 4, you see. They've made it Chester, and they're the 4 races. But there's very few people that I've ever told about it, and the people that I've picked up in boat people, they don't think it's all about it. But where the proof is, when the boat was made, this one, they put a diamond under the front strut. You know that big strut you tie your ropes on? That diamond's underneath there like that.
And so they made a different shape for each one, was that it?
Yes, now the other one is just like that under there. But the fellow what's got that one, he's never seen that yet. He don't know it's there. The only man knows it's there.
And you tell me they were built in...
It's Chester on the D. The fellow what was telling me, he reckon his sister was, 2 sisters was born on the boat. He was 1680, he was, and that was 11 years ago at Wolverhampton, so it must be about 72 years since the boat was built, you see.
It sounds a bit old, but in fact, you are even older than the boat.
I've shortened, I shortened the top counter to go down to the Leeds and Liverpool, to Leeds. But I couldn't alter the bottom counter because it was in the water, so I'd leave that this time.
Are you saying
year.
your boat, which is an ordinary narrowboat, is too long to go on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal?
Yes, you can only go with 62 foot.
So you've cut the end off?
I've cut the back off to make it fizz.
A do-it-yourself conversion, almost ready for new waterway journeys after 72 years. Well, now here's a Leeds and Liverpool canal boatman from Skipton talking about variations in boats that really were built for that great northern waterway.
There were smaller boats and bigger boats, and the smaller ones were the better sailing boats than the big ones because they tried to improve and make them wider in the bottoms, and they didn't sail as good as the old ones, you see, because old ones were made the same pattern as canal.
They'd lie in the bed of the canal
That's
better.
it, better. They're rounder in the bills. Well, they tried to improve and make them flatter, and they would neither steer nor go. They used to call them horse killers. As soon as the horse stopped, boat stopped. They were like that, dead pigs. Difference in building them, you see. And then there were different dockyards, you see. You could get a boat built at Whiteburg, and it'd be a good horse boat, but in the river a bad boat. The water would come over the top. Now from Shipley, Wigan, Riley Green, they made them bluff. And when water hit them, they lifted, you see. They were better river boats, but they didn't sail as fast in canal.
At Burnley there was a yard which provided such boats. Here a former builder recalls a launching ceremony which he first met as a young man.
There was a ceremony. In fact, it was probably the 2 or 3 months' work, maybe 4 or 5 months' work, in odd, what can I say, quiet moments when there was nothing else to do. So that when the boat were ready for its launch, and everybody got quite excited, and the apprentices were obliged to go down with the boat into the water. You were bundled on board, and you had to do it. The first time down was quite thrilling, but after that, the sort of thing, you got used to it, you know.
You recall doing that as an apprentice in the 50s?
Yes, no, in the, I would say in the 40s, really, during the war years. I was an apprentice. I started work at the beginning of the war, about 1942, I started work.
It would be a bit of a fall down the slipway there.
Yes, it would be about, I would think, possibly about 20 feet into the water, and maybe at an angle from, say, 6 foot to water level. And it got a bit of speed on because the boat would weigh quite a lot, an old wooden boat. I don't know what it'd weigh. It'd weigh quite a few tons anyhow, you know.
Once you were down in the water, of course, you'd hit it with a bit of force.
Bit of force, and then a lot of rocking about and clinging on for grim death, and then boat settled down. And then once boats got settled, you had to run about then at bottom of hold to see if there were any leaks from any poor workmanship. And if there was any leaks or even little dribbles from poor workmanship, everybody hoo-ha'd about it, you see. And if there were any leaks from the little section of boat what you'd repaired yourselves or caught yourself, which would be called your berth, that was assigned to you as that little piece. When any leaks there, you hung your head in shame, you see, and everybody looked at you and you vowed to make a better job next time you were caulking boat, you see.
Water in the boat is deadly, and I suppose if a boat's been out of water for some time, especially if it's not been quite totally undercover, it would take a bit of rainwater and so on. How did you deal with that?
Well, in the bottom of the boats there'd be 2 or 3 plug holes. When you brought the boat up out of the water to repair, you'd knock these bungs out, what they call bungs, you see, like a bung in a barrel. And these were bungs in a boat bottom. And the last thing that you did before you launched the boat, after repairing, was to go around and make sure all these bung holes, there'd probably be 2, well, at least 2, possibly 3 in length of a boat, bung holes, which you'd make sure were re-bunged up with some good pegs, accurately measured, and then of course when you'd driven it into the hole in the plank, you'd to sew it off fairly neatly, but you just maybe left a 1/4 of an inch sticking out below, and of course inside the hole you left maybe 4 or 5 inches sticking up so that it was easily spotted if it was ever needed for some reason, you know. I remember on one occasion one of these holes was overlooked, but fortunately it wasn't in my little berth of the boat, the part I was looking after. And a great cheer went up when this plume of water came up, about 4 or 5 foot up in air, like one of these fountains, you know. And somebody had to run up to joiner's shop quite hurriedly and make a bung the right size while somebody put their hand over it all. And then that bung was driven in from the inside then, which was the wrong way about it, but it had to be a fairly accurate bung that time, yeah.
Bending timber into the complicated shapes required for building is achieved by placing planks first into a box of steam. There was one such box at the yard in Wigan.
It was an upright Lancashire boiler, and it was fed the old timber that you took out the boat. It was then reused and kindled for the fire, plus a bit of coal as well. We could put planks in, I would say, 20 to 30 foot lengths. And if they stuck through, if you had a longer length, so the box wouldn't take it, you just wrap the end up with rags, and they were piping hot when they came out, I'll tell you. You had to sort of wear rags on your hands that you get burned. But we bent them round then. It was a twist, as well as your straight bending, you had your twist in it as well when you was going under the bows or under the sterns.
Had you got the feeling of working within a tradition, that's to say that older men were showing you how the job should be done?
Oh, without them, you wouldn't have stood a chance. See, I didn't have a great education. I had to pick it up.
The boats from your yard here had got their own look, hadn't they?
Everyone knew where that boat was made. You could tell by its lines. That was from Wigan, you'd say. That's a Leeds boat. And flying up and down, you know. You knew that, that's so-and-so made at Leeds. And then there was another boatyard at Raleigh Green near Blackburn. You could always tell these styles. The boatmen that drove the barges, you know, that they was always for taking it out of you. No, we've not got that boat done yet, you know. There's that man up yonder at Raleigh Green is... We come by the other day and there was nothing there, and we come down today, he says, and it's halfway built, you know.
When you were finishing your boats, were there any decorative features?
Oh, yes. We had a chap who was very good with a brush. He was a good sign writer, and it was all fancy. The name was there and all the scrolls around it, yeah. And there was a standard colours as well, what we call red oxide for your big area. And then what we call the wash strips, that's a little edging to safeguard them falling over. That had its whiteness. That was white, I think it was then.
What about cabin design? Was that your own style?
On your deck, you had a central hole, what we call the scuttle, and there was no step to it. You used to just bolt down it. Your hands were 4 foot from the ground, and you'd just shove up. And then as you drop through that hole, on either side of the boat, there was the bed holes, what we call the bed hole. And some had doors on, but them seemed to get in. Well, they got in the way then, so they had curtains on, you know, and they had a bunk in on either side, and a stove, a coal stove, which always very cosy, you know, and some had them brassoed up as well, and they used to black them, make them shine. There was good clean boats, you know.
Did you get a lot of business really caulking and repairing as boats grew older?
The water's edge was always the danger line of a boat, when it's in and out the water. Maintenance-wise underwater, you never really need to bother with it. From the water's edge and maybe upwards, that's where the wetting and drying takes place. That's where a lot of maintenance was required, stripping them out and then putting them back in and caulking up again, pitching and blacking.
But we're actually by the slipway, aren't we? Or an old slipway?
Yeah, this is the land, the area where it was, yeah.
How did you put them in at this point?
You'd start off with start building your new one, and you'd fix your blocks, centre block right down under your keel, and then you'd lay on there with your keel, and then you'd start from there to build it. And when it was completed, then we would have to come up here and borrow those slipways, which could be detached, and you'd have to drag them down there and then put them under there, and then wedge it all up and knock your blocks away, then that your boat rested on your carriages, which was on the slips, and then there'd be a man at each end with a hammer and like a sprag, and then the foreman would be there in the middle, and then he'd just go out, and then you both struck with your hammers simultaneously, because if you didn't, if one went before the other, you was in trouble. One end would shoot. So it had to be a joint blow, and then she would swish down. It was a great moment. People had come along on the banks and watch it, you know, that happened to know at the time. It was a grand moment, but what I didn't like, it was when that boat sailed away. I felt as if I'd lost a part of my life, you know. Somehow I can't explain it, but once you made that boat, you missed it when it had gone.
Boats and boat building at just a few of the many canal dockyards were recalled today by Richard Johnson, Jim Higgs, Ken Wrigley, Isaiah Atkins, Fred Parker, Jim Bridge, Jim Cassidy and Norman Johnson. In the next edition of On the Cut, boat people talk about the trade usage and business to which their boats were put.